I'd like to welcome all of you here to Hillside for the memorial service for Bette Cohen. Before we begin today's service for Bette, let us take a moment to silence our phones. And I'd like to welcome to the podium Cantor Mitzi Schwartz.
God, you have created us in your image and enabled us to share in your enduring righteousness. You have placed eternity into our hearts, and you have implanted within our souls a vision of eternal life. You, God, are the light of our life. You are our hope in eternity. Oseh Shamayim Varetz Ezri Meim Adonai Oseh Shamayim Varetz. I lift up my eyes unto the mountains. From where does my help come? I lift up my eyes unto the mountains. From where does my help come from? My help comes from God, the maker of heaven and earth. My help comes from God, the maker of heaven and earth. So, we are a very large and loving community of souls who have come today to be together for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to honor and celebrate and recount the life of Bette Jane Cohen. Bette Jane Cohen, just to look out and see all of you, was clearly a woman who embodied life. Bette was a true Eshet Chayil. She was the true definition of what it means to be a woman of valor. She lived her life fully. She lived it passionately, and boy, did she live it with gusto. She lived with intensity, with creativity, with vulnerability, curiosity, and a deep, deep sensitivity to her surroundings, to all of the people who surrounded her, her large, loving, loving family, her wide, wide circle of friends and colleagues. She lived with sensitivity even to Mother Earth itself. Bette was inspirational to so many people on so many levels. She was so deeply loved and cherished and honored by every single person who ever knew her. Of Bette, her younger sister Rita says this: she was the most beautiful person, physically and mentally. She was inspirational. She was a woman who would seek out what her heart yearned to know and to experience and to understand. She was an avid, avid researcher, and she valued deeply the pursuit of knowledge. She attended UCLA, one of many prestigious institutions, but ultimately, as Rita puts it, the world was the University of Bette Jane Cohen. Bette learned by doing. Bette's nephew, Ezra, puts it this way. He says she was a person who moved toward life. She seized opportunities. Whether it was the opportunity to put an immensely talented but largely unknown architect into a wide public awareness, or the opportunity to go to a museum, take a hike, ride a bike, have dinner with her family all in one day, mind you. Bette was one who never let grass grow under her feet. Perhaps that grass never actually really got entangled in her toes because, as Joseph, Ezra's older brother, says, Bette was a person who intrinsically understood that we all have a limited time on this earth. Joseph says that Bette lived her whole life with such a generosity of spirit, with such enthusiasm, because she really got that our time does indeed come to an end. It does. And you know, our Jewish sages teach that if there is a death in a community and a wedding, and the death in the community happen to be occurring at the very same time and the very same moment, one should first attend that death and that funeral, and then go to the wedding. Because when we understand that our time here is finite, then there's a chance that we will feel the imperative to live our lives authentically right now. Bette Jane Cohen got that message. She lived by that wisdom long, long, long before her illness. And nephew Ezra tells us again, she lived that way after her cancer diagnosis too. That's how she lived. It's just who she was. Bette loved nature, and she loved how structures that human beings create are informed by nature. She was intrigued how sensitive architects use natural settings to enhance and frame their creations. And this awareness and this understanding that she had was so compelling for her that she was drawn to one immensely talented and creative architect named John Lautner, who'd already been building magnificent homes and hotels and other structures for decades, long before Bette became aware of him. So as she gained her awareness of Lautner and his work, she decided to make a documentary film about him. And she entitled it The Spirit in Architecture, John Lautner. With this film, Bette pretty much single-handedly introduced John Lautner to the world beyond that of only architects. Before their paths crossed, the general public barely knew of this man. But because Bette was so instrumental in bringing his work forward to the attention of the public, none other than the LA County Museum of Art acquired his Steets Goldstein house. Bette's love and respect for nature, for film, for creativity, for joyful expression, altered John Lautner's life and legacy in ways that I'm sure neither of them could have ever predicted or predetermined. They could have never imagined. We all come into this world with our very own unique energy and mission. And Bette's love of the earth and nature came with her actually stamped into her given birth name. Bette's Ladino name was Bulisa, which is derived from the ancient Hebrew word Beulah. Beulah is a word that is found in the book of Isaiah, in the prophetic book of Isaiah, in chapter 62, verse 4. And Beulah means literally to espouse, to marry. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of the non-coincidental coincidence found in Bette's name. Here are some translated words from the book of Isaiah. Nevermore shall you be called forsaken, nor shall your land be called desolate. But you, Israel, shall be called, I delight in your land, and you are espoused to me, for I, God, take delight in you. Isaiah was describing how the people of Israel would be married to their land, joyful as a bridegroom rejoicing over his bride. Our Bette, Bulisa Beulah, was indeed espoused to the natural world and to its magnificent beauty. She was married to the land. And if you ever wonder about that, simply go and visit her home in the Hollywood Hills, and you'll know. Ask Stephen first. Bette gave so much to all of her relationships, and her family was everything to her. Family members described her to me as the glue that bound them all together. But we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge the two absolutely most complete loves of her life, her Beshert, her soulmate, Stephen Zaitsu, and their beloved son, the apple of her eye, Jacob. Bette was the love of Steve's life. Family describes Steve and Bette as being two peas in a pod. They did everything together, and their values and their interests intersect flawlessly. They flawlessly intertwined. She accompanied him to medical functions of all kinds. Joseph describes Stephen as the elder scholar of orthopedic care in Los Angeles. And Stephen gladly accompanied Bette to her gala film openings, her art shows, hikes, you name it. I just found out that they all love to kayak. A love my family shares. There is a Cohen Zaitsu family story that exemplifies their mutually shared joy and delight and how it flowed so easily and effortlessly between them. For a special occasion, I'm told, they bought each other a present. This was years ago. So they get the present, you know the story. And the time comes to present the present. So Bette gives Stephen his present, and he opens it, and it's a beautiful teapot. Now it's Bette's turn for Steve to present her with her gift. She opens it, and it's a beautiful teapot. Thus began the lifelong teapot collection, of Betty Cohen and Steve Zaitsu. Jacob, you were your mother's pride and joy. When you were born, you became your mother's full-time job. She adored you. Your cousins all tell me that you were the source of all of her pride. And I hear that you have been known to say many times, I really like hearing about my mom before she had me. Well, Jacob, you've heard so many stories and anecdotes and recountings of how beloved your mother was. You've heard about and you know from your own experience her adventurous spirit, her fierce love for her entire family, her relationships with your cousins before you were born and after. And now it's time for all of us to hear these stories directly from the people who experienced them with Betty. So I would like to begin at this time by calling up Betty's father, Joseph Cohen, who will be the first of what I suspect might be many people here who have their own very, very personal reminiscences to share about the life, the love, and the legacy of Betty Jane Cohen.
In life and in death, Betty knew she has and she will continue to help people. For example, she chose to donate her body to science so others can learn from her. Betty was survived 4 years of pancreatic cancer. Those years were a blessing for our families. I say that because 4 years is an eternity for many people. They don't last a month, 6 weeks, a typical case of pancreatic cancer. It's a terrible illness. But our family used those 4 years to make sure Betty had the most of our love and devotion, as well as the best medical care available. Betty was part of a research program at Columbia University Department of Computational Biology, where they will continue to study from specimens of her tumor to develop a model of pancreatic cancer that will be used to learn more about that disease to help guide the treatment of others. She hoped that this will lead to a better, longer life for others of this disease. Betty chose to donate her body to UCLA research. She traveled all over the world with her documentary film. Her film was screened all over the United States, Europe, Australia, Russia, China, and she had plans to show it in India. She inspired young architects to study Lautner's work and then go on to teach, sometimes in collaboration with her. Just this past year, she screened her film in Los Angeles, Copenhagen, Rotterdam, Delft, Brussels, Beijing, and Paris, and London. She judged master's degree thesis projects in Paris. So with all these travels extensively during the last 25 years or so, Bette photographed, filming, teaching, learning, inspiring others, especially going to galleries, museums, architecture, and gardens. Hopefully she'll be in the Garden of Eden. She loved to learn and to share what she knew. Bette loved our annual reunion in Catalina. She'd be the first one up and out as soon as the sun rises. And she'd be out there, she's snorkeling, swimming, playing in the sand, playing ball, bicycling, and everything. She took advantage of the whole thing. Well, we would get up at 9 o'clock and have no breakfast. Being with her family and her friends meant so much to Bette, to be with the people that she loved. And that's my Bette. Thank you.
I would like to call up Ruth Zaitzu, Betty's mother-in-law.
Before I start, I want to pay tribute to an incredible family, the Cohens, for all they've done for Harris and myself, and especially Steve. I'm going to try to read my printing. About 25 years ago, Stephen brought Bette to our house. You knew her, and you can see why I marveled. What a sweet, beautiful girl. And like a Jewish mother, I mused, surely a perfect match for my son, the doctor. 25 years later, my instincts were right on the button. It was a perfect match. We are thrilled with heartwarming memories of the girl we loved and respected. Like Miriam, the revered sister of Moses, Bette inspired others and celebrated life. Bette was generous, thoughtful, and loved people. She multitasked, working on many projects. She had intellectual curiosity. Most recently, she began to research into Salton Sea, and Albert Frey, another architect in Palm Springs, who built the clubhouse that they used to have in its heyday. She was the creator, as you've heard, of a wondrous film, The Spirit of Architecture, about John Lautner, probably the only one he agreed to speak on the film. And when she introduced him, she once said she went into his office, having seen so much of his work, and she said to him, "Would you be willing to make a documentary with me. And he said, "Well, you're tall enough. Let's do it." And then, of course, she had a love of gardens, translated into a profusion of flowers around her home, and a fruit-bearing cherry tree, and a pomegranate tree, and a redwood sequoia growing to the entrance of their house that they planted. She had rows of of orchids along the wall, and of course, why not? And a row of orchids growing along the window in her living room. Bette was a Renaissance woman. On a personal level, after many of her great occasions celebrating with family, she lavished me with big slices of chocolate cake. And then she included me in a cookbook she printed, Surely Kindness, Since I Eat Better Than I Cook. And every Thanksgiving, when we celebrated, we were treated to her fabulous pumpkin pies. The finest achievement of the marriage of Steve and Bette is my grandson, Jacob, the light of our lives. He embodies the wonderful qualities of both of his parents, and Bette had dreams for Jake. In addition to becoming an engineer, she thought he should be a doctor, a lawyer, a merchant chief. Another Jewish mom, right? Her devotion was of biblical proportion to family and friends. I salute and I honor Bette for her valiant spirit. She has left us inspired by the woman she loves, and we all loved her. And I have a feeling her spirit is here, and she looks out at all of her friends and family, and it gives her delight because she was a people person. And so the only thing I could say is God bless you, Bette, and peace.
Joseph Morris Cohen. Morris is another of Bette's brothers.
Wow, there's a lot of people here. Okay. Even though today is tragic and sad event, I hope everyone can keep their heads high. I am sure everyone here knows my sister Bette had a heart of gold. She was a lady of valor and strength. Talk about spirit of architecture, spirit of adventure. I think she named the title for herself. It suits her perfectly. Growing up in the 70s with Bette, always had a camera on her hip. She managed to get every shot nobody would dare do. Strangers, close-ups, any situation. She was fearless. Like all siblings, we shared joy, we shared pain. She opened up my mind through my life. I still hear her say to me, just do it. Bette meant so much to me. I'm so proud to be her brother.
She never left anybody behind, any situation, any time. You could always count on Betty. Here's a story. We were traveling to Europe with the family, the whole gang. Well, Betty's luggage got lost. Just Betty's. Okay, so we're arriving on the ship with what she has, and I tell you, nothing got in her way of having a good time. I kept taking double takes. How are you doing this, Betty? You look different every day, every meal. She laughed, said it's nothing. Finally, after 10 days, she explained to me, you see this scarf? Well, it doubles as a shoulder wrap, and then it reverses as a dress. It was beyond me, but it was just simply elegance. She always got the job done without any problems. By the way, they found her luggage the day we left. Here's another story. Betty and I were traveling, and we arrived back in LA at the gate, the luggage gate, carousel. There was Arnold Schwarzenegger. They saw each other and started talking and talking and talking. An hour must have gone by. Well, when we finally left, I asked Betty, what were you guys talking about all this time? Baba Javos. She just loved people, anytime, any place, and people loved her. Betty always had time for me, even though her battles were more overwhelming than mine, anyone's. She had the courage to withstand and never complain. This is the way she did it, respectfully and with love. She had a deep compassion for everyone around her. She just continued to radiate love and compassion for others. Her courage was so remarkable and so beautiful. Many years ago, when Betty wasn't working on films, or even when she was working on films, sometimes in spring we would sell flowers on the corner for Mother's Day and Easter. Betty, Ed Munner, and I, we always had a blast. It was fun, just never a dull moment really, but she was the perfect partner. She inspired me and loved unconditionally. She was a rock to me and all of us. We already miss her, and we always will. God bless you, Betty. I will always be grateful for you and think of you with love. There was one thing, I rearranged my thoughts. 1 second. This is just a quote from I can find it here, from Stairway to Heaven. There's a feeling I get when I look to the west and my spirit is crying for leaving. Thank you. Okay. I'm okay.
Let's see. Ed Munter, would you like to? Please be aware that there really are 2 very tiny steps here. So if anyone does come up, be aware of them.
Well, everyone said it, so it must be true. Betty was a very amazing person. And I had the privilege of spending some of the last days that she graced us with her presence at her house. And Betty faced her passing, the way she embraced her life, with love and with grace, with strength, with courage. And Steve would tell us when she had strength enough to talk to one of us, and we'd come in and sit by her bedside, and we'd feel so much, I would feel so much loss. I'm going to lose my cousin. And she said to me, and she had something loving to say to every single person who came in that room. You'd come in like feeling like, oh, how can I deal with this? And she would fill the room with love and light. She was absolutely amazing. And she told me that we reminisced about some art projects we did, and she said Eduardo, she calls me Eduardo. She says, you're like a brother to me. You've always been like a brother to me. She prepared for her transition by turning up her light, pouring out her love with amazing grace. Then with all her strength and courage, Betty Jane gave up the fight, letting go into love's deep embrace. Let your love come down, let it wash all over me. Let the truth that I've been seeking be revealed. Just as the spirit leaves the body to be free, I surrender to your love, and I am healed. I ask myself, how many times must I wander from my home before I remember where I live? And how many times must I imagine I'm alone, forgetting what I have is what I give? Let your love come down, let it wash all over me. Let it wash me to my soul, just like a river running back to the sea. I am healed in your love, I am whole. And we listen to the stillness, each responding to the call. And the soul returns to that which does not change. At some point the prayer becomes, I surrender all. And in the end, only love remains. Let your love come down, let it wash all over me. Let the truth that I've been seeking be revealed. Just just like the spirit leaves the body to be free. I surrender to your love. I'm a child in your arms. I surrender to your love, and I am healed.
We may try to find a way to come back to that hook. I surrender to your love and I am healed, and sing it all together before we conclude. Thank you, Ed. George Woods, would you like to come up?
Well, I wanted to share a little something that I think about often about Bette. It's, a lot of people like to have things in common and interests. And Bette and I had one that was kind of fun. And it was about just about every occasion that required a cake, we would have a discussion about that cake. And it was very funny. The first time it happened, it was at one of the children's birthday parties, and it was a cake that came from Ralph's. And we both talked about how much we loved those supermarket cakes, that they were just like perfect. And we went into great detail about the frosting. It had to be grainy to be really good, and it had to have synthetic shortening. And it was particularly good if it had enormous flowers and you got one on your piece. And it was funny because almost after everything, it would be like, so, what'd you think of the cake? It was very fun. Bette would sit there. Well, it's true. Bette loved flowers. She loved her garden, and she loved the beauty of nature. And she expressed this appreciation of beauty in many different ways. This week, her dining room table was, again, a tableau of elements. It was this beautiful still life of squashes and pumpkins from her parents' place in Malibu that she was really excited about and proud about, and some flowers from her own garden. And it was interesting because as long as I've known her, she always created like these altars of beauty with nature. And they were very inspiring. In fact, possibly my whole career is based on knocking her off. I saw things in such different ways with her. She also loved parties and celebrations. And whenever she entertained, she created an atmosphere of beauty, first of all. It was always fun. And there was always kind of a humorous element there. Sometimes hidden, sometimes not. But it'd be like kind of, there might be a little skull and maybe some kind of weird little figurine crawling out of a bowl of food or, coming through some flowers. It was always delightful to be with her. And actually, it's funny, she saw everything with a photographer's eye. She really did. Because anything that she did, if you actually looked at it or took a picture of it, it was perfect. It was like a perfect balance of things. She was just amazing with this. Again, I learned quite a bit from her. And one of the other things about Bette that I really love so much is that her laughter and her delight all the time throughout events, or if it's like coming back from snorkeling. I didn't go on those things with her because it was always so exhausting. It was like, God, I can't believe you're doing all of this like in 3 hours. I mean, she just had so much fun, and she just had this wonderful laugh that just kind of lifted everyone up and kind of created this beautiful atmosphere. And she generously shared herself and absolutely brought out the best in her family and her friends. So today, I was making a bouquet for us, and then it came to me that her life was a bouquet. And I thought about the elements of it. And she always included kindness, appreciation, and gratitude. Actually, it was funny because I saw this just recently when she was in the hospital. She genuinely liked the nurses and technicians that had taken care of her. I mean, they would come in and she would say wonderful things about each one of them and really connected with each person. And it wasn't to try to like get it better so she got better service. That wasn't what she was after. She was totally for real with, I mean, how nice they were and what good people they were. She acknowledged goodness. She also had the ingredients in her bouquet of curiosity, discovery, and enthusiasm. And her enthusiasm was contagious. We had the good fortune to have many wonderful trips together. And she would always do research before we'd go away. And also, she would find something off the beaten track and then convince all of us that we must go. And it was always wonderful and a great surprise. In this bouquet as well is appreciation, gratitude, and sincerity. Her bouquet was also fragrant, particularly most recently, with grace, humility, and generosity. She shared herself and she played well with others. She tied up this bouquet with respect, grace, and dignity. I really enjoyed her sisterly love. She filled a void in my own life. And all I can say is that Betty is in my heart forever.
Ezra, do you want to come up?
Oh my gosh. It's a beautiful assembly of people, friends and family, to honor and pay final respects to my sister Betty. Truly moving and beautiful. Not surprised that we all come from so many different backgrounds and so many different connections with Betty, because Betty truly loved people. I want to say a few things about my sister Betty. First, as you've been hearing, she was an incredible person to travel with. Stacy Bennon, a family friend for years, posted this morning on Facebook that she was always up for an adventure. Well, yes, she was. I can't believe I'm quoting Facebook. But Betty always liked to post on Facebook. It was a way to connect with people because she had friends all over the world, and you would get likes, and you look who gave her likes on these pictures she would post, and they were from everywhere, and it was always so interesting. And you've been hearing about our family travels, so I'll say that over the years, Betty and our extended family took a number of trips together. And no matter where we went, whether it was Santa Barbara, Europe, Turkey, Israel, wherever, Betty was always prepared. She would have lists of interesting museums, internationally acclaimed buildings, all kinds of things for us to see. And in that regard, Betty had this amazing pool of energy. Every time we would arrive in a new city, she always wanted to make sure we saw everything. And I should add that Steve was a great companion and a great travel partner with her. I think Steve was truly the only one who could readily keep up with her. Because typically, around the middle of a travel day, most of us were ready to take a little brief pause and basically go back to the hotel or ship. No matter, Betty and Steve would continue on to see more. And of course, Jacob was with them. And I know everyone in our family remembers the purple jogging stroller, which Betty and Steve used for Jacob while he was a young man. I think, did you say till last year? Well, it's too bad that stroller did not have an odometer on it. Because by the age of 5 or 6, Jacob, I think, and maybe largely because of Betty, but there's Steve there too, but Jacob logged more miles and more cities and more museums and more art galleries and more gardens than most people do in a lifetime. Betty's excitement and energy for travel, to see and experience truly interesting places, was infectious and enriching for me and for others. Her passion, creativity, and vision was never more evident than in her accomplished work creating the valuable and enduring film, A Spirit in Architecture, John Lautner. The beauty and magnificence of John's creations would probably never have been known to me, but for the beauty and magnificence of her documentary work. It's almost exactly 4 years ago that Betty was first diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And I will tell you that Betty lived fully during her last 4 years. While treatments were difficult and the side effects took a toll on her body, I think she had a strong sense that the treatments were prolonging her life, and that sense made it worthwhile to her. She typically had treatment every other week. She filled the weeks without treatment with warm, heartfelt visits with friends and loved ones. Gardening in her home, which more and more became her sanctuary. Travel around the world with Steve to screen her film or to visit Jacob in Philadelphia or France, often coordinating trips to do both and more. During this time, I watched my sister grow and transform before my very eyes. I frequently told her how beautiful and amazing she was by the way she was taking on the challenge of this disease. Every single one of Betty's relationships grew and deepened during this time and healed where necessary. My sister was truly an inspiration to me, and I know to others. Dear Betty, I will always miss you. I am honored and proud to be your brother, and I am grateful for the effect and influence you have on my life. I love you. You are free. May your spirit soar, and may you rest in peace. Thank you.
Coco, would you like to come up? Coco Ruman?
These are two poems that we're going to read that were given to us by Sherry and Melanie and Meredith. Do not stand by my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on nipped grain. I am the gentle autumn rain when you awake in the morning's hush. I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circling flight. I am the soft star that shines at night. Do not stand by my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die. Let us be grateful to the people who make us happy. They are the charming gardeners who make our souls blossom.
Oh my goodness, there are a lot of people here. Thank you so much for coming. A lot of what I'm going to say, you've heard. It's all so beautiful. Thank you so much. It's so comforting. Anyways, Betty, you brought us to Hillside because this is what you wanted. You wanted to be remembered with your family, all together. Betty, your body will be a gift to science in hope of curing somebody else. Lastly, you have asked to become a tree and to live on in nature. Only Betty would think of these things. Only Betty would have so much and have things done in her own very authentic way. Betty loved family, and family loved her. Betty loved her prince, Steve, and he loved her back. She loved Jacob, and Jacob loved her back. Jacob, you are her continual light. I know you tried to protect her. Betty loved Mom and Dad, and she worried about you. And she tried to protect you. Mom and Dad, you loved her back. You would do anything for her. Betty loved her cousins, her aunts, her uncles, her siblings, her old friends, her new friends. Betty kept her friends, and they kept her. In our family, Betty was our peacemaker. When there was a problem amongst us, it was always Betty who would talk to everyone. She always wanted us to work out. That was only one of her many mitzvahs. It's now up to us to keep the peace. Betty had an intellectual inquisitiveness that was contagious. She made learning fun and taught us to appreciate each other and to experience art as a way of life, and life as a way of art. Betty wanted to be part of something extraordinary, but she didn't want to do it alone. She brought us all with her. Truthfully, at times it could be exhausting, but always memorable, sweet, savory. Betty would find the rich fullness and texture of any city, an elegant bar, or a walk down a dirt path, a hidden mural or a tiny secret street, the most gorgeous tree, the magnificent view you never really saw until she pointed it out. Everything was a wonderful discovery. She made us all explorers. This everybody knows. Everybody that's been with Betty and everybody that's traveled with her. But Betty was my sister. She was my big sister.